Hello, orators. Welcome to week 10 of the Art of Oratory. It's going to be a really quick recap to make sure you're on the right track for the next set of classes. So you had a video discussion, should have been posted by Sunday before this week starts. You'll have to have your responses up by Wednesday. Your individual outlines should come into me before class starts. I've seen a couple already come in. Awesome. And then you're studying for your test. So first hour of class, you'll have to bring your laptop or whatever device it is you're going to work on to do the test. It is a 1 hour test. I think it's a few minutes shy of 1 hour. You have to be in class. So details about that test. Basically, it's 45-point test. I have one bonus question that is going to possibly get you up to a 48. And you can see over here on, let me use the mouse here, it'll make it a little clearer. You can see sort of the breakdown, how I've said, that's my back end on Brightspace. You're going to use your review sheet to practice, but essentially you've got 11 questions that are multiple choice that are based on quiz 1, 12 from quiz 2, and then there are 8 points assigned to 4 short answer questions. Then there's going to be a longer question. It's going to be DAV, Maslow, or proxemics. So you need to be able to discuss those at some length. There's going to be a long question about Moravian, Aristotle, or Julian Treasure. And there's going to be a long question about the workshops. That should be a pretty straightforward one. You already did had to do peer assessments. You had to do a video discussion post. So, and then the bonus question, and that's a totally separate topic. What I would advise is that you should be on top of your grades. Over 50% of the grades are posted now. And yeah, if there aren't any updates of something that you think you've submitted, contact me. Feedback is posted on Brightspace. If you've got questions, send them through to me. All right, so test is behind us. And now you're really setting up and moving forward for your final individual presentations. Breathing's going to be critical to it. And of course, designing and planning. So I've given you all sorts of resources. You've got the handbook, you've got the eCampus readings, and then I gave you access to Nancy Duarte's book, Resonate, and I advised you to read just a few short pages, I think 25 to 32. And in there, she talks about presentations are someplace between report and story, because they've got to do a little bit more than be dry, full factual reporting like you have in a report, or full storytelling like you might do with a bunch of friends sitting around coffee, tea, or some other beverage. Got to figure out what's going to be your goal out of this. Are you being persuasive? Are you being motivating? Persuasive could be just sharing your perceptions, your perspectives, your views on a particular situation. So really make sure you've got a clear structure. You've got facts and storytelling. You're unfolding from a particular position, and then you're simplifying and clarifying for your audience. You also are going to have to figure out, so what am I doing here? What is the target action? Am I motivating? Am I just activating for engagement's sake? Am I engaging for engagement's sake? The really big thing is that you want to communicate genuinely. You want your audience to see you as a real individual. You want your audience to be able to connect to you and not think, oh, is this all just made up? Is this all just contrived? So you've got a nice, full here, what it is you're working on. You've been given the structure. You're working on an outline, has to be submitted before you come to class this week. We've done all sorts of activities to build up your confidence and your certainty in being able to use your DAV elements. The result should be a pretty solid presentation that you have designed, and then you have some rehearsals. In that video, for those of you who watched last week's lecture, you saw basically you're paring down. You're starting from a pretty big, tightly structured activity, reducing, reducing, reducing. I think he had advised maybe 10 times practicing to get yourself down to trigger sheets or your bare minimum number of words. So that's your delivery end of things. All righty. Now, this is an example from a TEDx event that I went to a few years ago. This is actually the write-up that was posted in 21. I went to one, I want to say, I went to it a couple of times in 19 and 20, and it was right before COVID. But I liked the very easy tips that they provided for becoming a speaker. And you could use those right here when you're doing your presentations for your classmates as well. Be yourself, plain language. Don't try to overwhelm us with fancy words. You're making that emotional connection with people. Your unique ideas and perspective is what's going to be the driving factor. We'll have heard immigrant stories, we'll have heard team captaining stories, we'll have heard facing the challenges of a first new car, a first rental of an apartment, a first purchase of a house. But it's your unique experience that's going to lure us in and make this an exciting kind of a storytelling presentation. Share your ideas, show it, and don't sell it. Well, that was obviously because it was, at a TEDx, they don't want you selling products. And of course, that's storytelling. Bring us along on that journey. This other tip here, sort of the thinking out of this imaginary speaker, this is critical for you to remember. When you present your talk to the class, it's the first time that we're going to see it. Yes, of course, I, as your teacher, have seen the various stages leading up to it, but I have not seen, heard, experienced your full talk. That is to say, don't memorize it tightly. We're hearing it for the first time. If you end up flipping your second and third key point, as long as you still have your star moment in there, it's not going to matter that much. You should be familiar enough with your content that you're able to convince us this was the layout of the story. Don't gasp and say, because then we're going to know that you didn't actually deliver what it was you were planning to deliver. So, your individual presentation, I've emphasized this, I did in class, in last week's lecture. The easiest one is the one where you have been impacted somehow or you have changed. Yes, you can do that motivational one. The impact or change tends to be easier. We're looking at about 10 minutes. That means nothing less than 8 minutes and nothing more than 12 minutes. Don't drag out your conversation so slow that you make the 8 minutes. It should still be at a conversational speed. And likewise, don't rush it up so quickly that we have a hard time imagining what it is you're actually talking about, because we're wishing that we could breathe for you to squish it all into 12 minutes. If you're following the Duarte advice, she says, put it down into a 3-act story. Same in terms of have your 3 key points that you're addressing. Your star moment, something they'll always remember. STAR, something they'll always remember. They being the audience, being us, your audience who's paying attention. That is sort of your high point. It's going to be the turning point in your story. It's going to be what actually triggered the impact or triggered the change. Your thesis needs to work with all 3 of your points. It needs to be woven the whole way through the story. So don't make your thesis too narrow. The example that I provided in class is always expect the unexpected. Picture of the pyramids, I said in class live during our week 10 lecture. I will walk through with you and show you some of the trigger sheets that I used when I did this course. The thesis, always expect the unexpected, started right from the get-go. You're working on your DAB, you're aware of your rhetoric, which is your whole setting, your audience. And of course, that's going to be largely structured based on the outline that you're preparing and providing. This is a really good example of how you're working on your 3-act story. It is your what is and what could be. And Duarte envisions this as a series of ups and downs. She's got a sort of square box structure and a reminder. You are to be the mentor. You are not the hero of your own story. For the audience to build an empathy with you, for the audience to genuinely connect with you, they need to see that you have weaknesses. They need to see that you are walking along on a journey. You're not already there and have it all figured out. That is critical. So if you're doing your 3-act story outline, you've got your setup. Of course, your setup has to include some kind of a cool grabber. You're introducing something, your main premise, what it is, some kind of a hint setting, what's all going to happen. And you've got your first plot point, some kind of a small that's going to sort of foreshadowing what's going to be the big change that we're going to see at some point, the big impact, something significant that's going to happen. And that is moving your story forward. Your thesis has to be really clearly articulated for us as well. Act 2, this tends to be the biggest, meatiest chunk of what it is you're working on. It is known as your confrontation. It is where you encounter your obstacles, where you're going to have to do some kind of convincing to us that this was actually how challenging it was. This is how you managed to get yourself through to the next step, right through to the peak, your climatic star moment, the one that we can't ever forget about the super cool event, the super deep sadness, the super amazing change, something that is major and significant that we have no difficulty seeing how and why you were impacted. Your 3rd act is resolution. It's your quick closing. It's your 3rd point. It's the smallest one. And as it says right here on the slide, it's the final resolution. The pull, push, tension is resolved. Okay, there should be no question that there's still something uncertain here. And your zinger, for it to be the most effective, is going to come right back to the grabber. And I will talk a little bit more about that in class, give some more examples. And that's one of those things that I can really work on with you as you have your one-on-one meetings with me. So how do we work on a grabber, and how do we create one that ties into the thesis? And what is the thesis that's not too big? Well, this is really where we're going to pull in some of that brain laterality stuff. We're going to have that right brain, left brain activity. And your grabber is really going to focus in on the right brain side. Connect with your audience. It is strongest if you can tie it into your thesis somehow. And it truly can be separate from your story. I hinted a little bit at that in class about how my thesis was always expect the unexpected, and how the grabber I used had nothing to do with the actual presentation I gave. It was tying to an emotional connection with the audience about Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, because you would think that the Wile E. Coyote eventually figured out he should be expecting the unexpected. He never really did, but anyways. It should be well planned. It is the one thing on your final outline, those of you who have looked ahead, that I expect to see pretty clearly written out. And it is the one piece that is most effective if you actually memorize it. If you've thrown in a quote from somebody, a famous quote, that then you need to have that running smoothly. You shouldn't stumble about a fact that you're putting out there or a quote that you're using from someone. The thesis, the what does it matter? Why is this an important message that I should even care about? This should be a broad approach, and then you're going to give your individual nuanced specifics to it. But remember, it needs to be fairly broad to go across your 3 points as well. You don't want your thesis changing during the presentation. All right, yes, that is an entertaining picture of some theater that I was involved in, and a few years ago I did quite a bit of community theater. and I happened to be a pastry chef. That was my persona, but really I was a gangster. So doubling up. If you ever want to take a look at it, Drowsy Chaperones, pretty funny musical. So all to say, add drama to your presentation. Have fun with it. You've got a structure. You've got the setup. You know where you're delivering it in our classroom. Now you add the pizzazz. You bring in a prop if you want to. Bring in your best energy. Make sure you've slept well the night before you present. You've got your different kinds of story patterns you can follow. You're using your dive structure. And really, I'm going to want you to deliver that extemporaneously. Before you get on the stage, you need to have somebody introduce you. This is one of those, it's going to be another small point activity, and your introducer should ideally not read your introduction. However, you, the speaker, have to provide the introduction to the introducer. And then the introducer has to deliver it effectively, because the introducer's job is to set up the audience and make them be ready for listening to you. The introducer should not do anything impromptu. The introducer should provide your full name and then again your first name. Know how to pronounce the person's name. Couple of statements. There's a template on Brightspace. And here is essentially the introduction that I had somebody do for me, where, I prepared this introduction, and then one of the fellow classmates, I told you I took this course a few years ago, essentially presented that. And it was, I gave the thesis, that's what I wanted, and then I worked with the threes, right? The itinerary was Kings and Tunes, Trains and Ships, Souks and Museums. They used my full name, Judy Puritt. They gave, fun trivia piece in there, daughter, chicken farmer, passion for history and travel, and then please join me in welcoming Judy. So pretty close to full script, a few dots in there for pauses, extended dashes, for adding in some words. All right, so for those of you who hand in outlines early, I will be doing some marking on probably the day before our class so that you can have it back. A few people have put their names down for week 12 and week 13 already. Reminder, I fill in from the front, 11, 12, 13. You should send me an email if you haven't put your name down already for something. And then, oh, I see I have a couple of mislabels up there, but anyways, all the details are there for you, provided for you on the Prof. Judy Google Drive. And then there's just a quick refresher of what happens with the remainder of the course, the discussion and responses. There's another TED Talk analysis. There's a Demono and Six Hats activity, another discussion post, and then a final reflection. So I think that pretty much is going to take us through to the end of this week's little lecture. And final references, always important to include those references. Bring your questions to class in week 10. Look forward to seeing you all then. Take care. And stop the recording.